First, we will have a roll call. Jane?
Vice Chair Boone. Commissioner Height. Commissioner Tedder. Commissioner Kohler. Commissioner Lang. Vice Chair Boone, have a quorum.
Next, if there's any communications
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. Nothing specific, but good to see you all.
If you're on the list, please come forward when I call you. State your name and address for the record, and you will have 5 minutes to speak. Seeing no one on the list, we will move on to the next item, which is the approval of the minutes from the June 26th meeting. Any comments or discussion about those minutes? Commissioner Height.
Would move to approve.
Oh, hang on a sec.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve those minutes. Can we have a vote? Oh, I'm sorry.
I believe you might have misspoken. The minutes are August 21st, not June.
August 21st. Sorry, our prior meeting. Thank you.
As corrected, I still move to approve.
As corrected.
And I'll second.
Okay. Now we will have a vote.
Commissioner Height.
Aye.
Commissioner Tedder.
Aye.
Commissioner Kohler.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boone.
Aye.
Commissioner Lang.
Aye.
Vice Chair, that passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next, we have a public hearing tonight on the McDonald's Sandstone Marketplace conditional site plan use, secondary use. It's going to be presented by Kristen Coate from the Planning Department.
Good evening, and thank you, Vice Chair Boone and Commission members. I am Kristen Cody, a Senior Planner in Planning and Development Services. This evening, for your consideration, I will be presenting the McDonald's at Sandstone Marketplace Conditional Use Site Plan. The subject property, which encompasses roughly 1.253 acres, lies to the south of Ken Pratt Boulevard, west of Common Drive, and east of County Road 1. The property is currently zoned MUR, which is Mixed Use Regional Center, and became part of the city's jurisdiction in 1998, following the Medea annexation. As per the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan, the property holds the designation of Regional Center. The request before you this evening is for the consideration of a 4,365 plus minus square foot fast food restaurant with a drive-through facility, which, according to zoning regulations, this use is classified as both conditional and secondary within the MUR zone district. According to zoning regulations, secondary uses cannot exceed more than 50% of the contiguous zoning area. In the Sandstone Marketplace subdivision, all land is vacant and remains for future development. The adjacent easterly retail sales use is designated as a permitted primary use, and the approved multifamily development south of this subdivision is a permitted secondary use. The total MUR zoned area is approximately 59 acres, allowing for up to 29.5 acres to be allocated for secondary uses. Currently, the approved southerly apartment complex occupies 7.67 acres, leaving 21.83 acres available for secondary uses. This proposed project will utilize 1.253 acres, which is within the allowable limits. The proposed project features a four-sided architectural design, including awnings on the north, south, and west elevation. Consistent materials are utilized on all sides of the building, ensuring compliance with Section 1505.120 of the Mixed-Use and Non-Residential Design Standards. This approach results in a cohesive and visually appealing design. And this is a color rendering of the east and north elevations. We'll go back one. And this is an illustration of the east and south elevations. North elevations. The parking layout for the proposed project includes a total of 29 parking spaces featuring 2 ADA compliant spaces and 5 mobile pickup spots. Additionally, there is 1 installed electric vehicle charging station, along with 2 EV-ready spaces, 3 EV-capable spaces, and 3 EV-capable light spaces. The design also incorporates 4 bike parking spaces, fulfilling the requirement of 5% of total parking allocated for bike storage. Overall, the parking layout meets all necessary electric vehicle parking requirements. And this is a depiction of the site plan, which illustrates the parking layout for the project. All electric vehicle parking is included within the designated central parking area. The bike rack is situated on the western portion of the property, while the ADA compliant spaces and mobile pickup spots are conveniently located south of the main entrance. The proposed project adheres to connectivity requirements outlined in Section 1505060 of Longmont Development Code. It provides direct access from the primary entrance to sidewalks along Bryan Avenue to the south and Ken Pratt Boulevard to the north, without requiring any street crossings. Additionally, there are 2 points of ingress-egress to facilitate internal vehicle circulation on the southern side of the site. A future connection is also planned to the eastern property in reference to the internal sidewalks on site, ensuring full connectivity once this area is developed. And this is an illustration that highlights the connectivity of the public rights-of-way along East Ken Pratt and Bryan Avenue to the south. It also depicts the planned connection to the eastern property and the 2 ingress and egress points for the overall site. Furthermore, internal sidewalks and crosswalks are included to ensure efficient circulation throughout the property. The applicant has submitted a traffic compliance letter confirming adherence to previous traffic impact studies. The proposed project aligns with the projections made in the traffic impact study for the Sandstone Marketplace subdivision and final plat. Additionally, it complies with the findings of the traffic impact study completed in May of 2023 with an assumed total 11,500 square feet of fast food restaurant space. The review process for conditional use permit applications follows the same steps as major development projects, as outlined in sections 1502.050 and 1502.070. The decision-making body may impose conditions to ensure compatibility with surrounding areas and to mitigate impacts such as noise, odor, and site layout. Time limits may be set and periodic reviews may be required to ensure ongoing compliance. Once approved, these conditions are recorded and are binding on the property, applying to both the applicant and any future owners. If the conditional use is discontinued for more than 1 year, the permit automatically lapses. Minor changes to an approved use can be reviewed as amendments, while major expansions will require a new review. Based on the record and preceding information, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission consider approval of the conditional use site plan for the McDonald's at Sandstone Marketplace as outlined in PZR 2024-8A. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Additionally, the applicant is here with a presentation and available to discuss the project further. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. So the applicant is here tonight. Would you like to address us, please? Hi.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission, city staff, members of the public. My name is Carolyn White. I'm Land Use Counsel for the applicant. I'm with Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck, and we're here for conditional use site plan number DV site plan 23-00016, which we're just going to call the McDonald's conditional use site plan. I'm here today with my colleagues Jessica McCallum and Curtis Rowe from Kimley Horn, as well as the McDonald's team members, Trevor Profit and Todd Wright. The applicant team recently presented this site plan to this body, as you may recall, and this body voted 4-3 to deny the application. The applicant then appealed that to City Council. We went up to City Council, and then as we were preparing for that hearing on City Council and considering all of the information that needed to be in the record, it really became clear that all of that information wasn't presented to you in the initial hearing. And so City Council ended up remanding this matter back to you. And here we are again, and we really appreciate having this second opportunity to present the complete information to you and go through all of the reasons why this application meets the requirements in the code for the conditional use site plan. I'm probably ahead of myself a couple of slides here. So this is the applicant project team, which I just mentioned. And this is just a little bit of that timeline. Your original Planning Commission hearing in June, up to City Council on appeal, we had a continuance, and then ultimately they remanded back to you, and here we are on October 16th for a new full-blown hearing on this matter. I'd like to just remind you a little bit about the history of the site. In a strange twist of fate, I actually worked on that original Walmart many years ago. It was one of my very first hearings when I joined the firm in the private sector. And from that time, it has always been envisioned that one of these additional pad sites was going to be, one or more of these additional pad sites would be a potential fast food drive-through restaurant as a compatible use with that original Walmart use. Obviously, since then, the property has changed hands a couple of times. There have been other approvals that the city has considered. The property was subdivided as Sandstone Marketplace Subdivision Filing Number 1 in 2010, and then there was the more recent preliminary subdivision plat in June of 2023, and then ultimately the final plat earlier this year. The development is, as was already mentioned, within the MUR zoning, which does allow for fast food restaurants as a conditional use. And so obviously, we're here tonight on remand to give you that full picture. I should also mention that you have in your packets a letter from us that summarizes what I'm going to be presenting tonight in terms of the different criteria and how the application meets that criteria. And that letter also had a whole bunch of attachments. I apologize for all the trees we killed to get those packages to you. But a lot of that information is information we thought that you ought to have in front of you about the history of the site and how this particular site fits into the overall site of the overall Sandstone Marketplace use. So we have sort of three sets of potentially applicable criteria here. We have the discussion of secondary uses that's in the code. We have the site plan criteria, which is mostly more technical criteria about things like setbacks and lot coverage and landscaping and so on. And then in the conditional use category, we don't really have criteria per se. The conditional use focuses on the site plan criteria, but it also, the code provides the opportunity, as was just mentioned by Kristen, the opportunity to add conditions if you feel that's necessary to make it compatible. So we're going to go through these different sets of criteria, starting with the secondary use criteria, which we wanted to just highlight for you here on the screen because I know, even though I wasn't here last time, I did watch the video, and I know there was a lot of discussion about what exactly does it mean to be a secondary use, and how should the commission interpret that in light of this particular application. So we want to spend a fair bit of time talking about these three secondary use criteria. So the first one is the secondary use is a scale, design, and location that is compatible with the surrounding uses and potential adverse impacts that will be mitigated to the maximum extent feasible. So two parts to that criteria, right? What we're proposing to do in terms of scale, design, and location fits in with the other existing uses that are around it. And I note in particular those three things, scale, design, and location, because that doesn't say use. This particular criterion is not asking, hey, is this a good use for this location? It says scale, design, location, make it compatible with the surrounding uses. The second criterion is the one talking about the use being consistent with the comprehensive plan and the purpose and intent of the code and the underlying zoning districts. And I know you all spend a fair bit of time talking about that as well. How does it fit with Envision Longmont? Is it consistent with the comprehensive plan and so on? And we're going to speak about that a little bit more. And then the secondary use will not substantially diminish the availability of land to be developed for primary uses. And that's the analysis that Kristen just went through. The way that you all have chosen to interpret the concept of primary and secondary uses, that secondary uses can't occupy more than 49% of the total site. Since the rest of this particular parcel remains vacant, there is still plenty of land available for primary uses. And so that criterion is met almost on a numerical basis just by that calculation. So as summarized on the slide and as staff has concluded in his staff report, this application does in fact meet all of those criteria. We're going to go through those in just a little bit, but before we do that, and by the way, we agree with staff's analysis in the staff report, and I won't be repeating that. We'll be supplementing that with some additional points that we want to share. But before we do that, I'd like to ask Jessica McCallum to come to the podium and walk you through the site plan in a little bit more detail so that I can come back and apply what's in the site plan to these criteria.
Hi, thank you, Commission members. I'm Jessica McCallum. I am with Kimley Horn and Associates. We are the civil engineering consultant for McDonald's on this project. I wanted to talk a little bit about the project layout and site background. So what you see currently is the site layout for the McDonald's as it sits today. Some items that I wanted to point out is that this is on a 1.25 acre commercial lot, as we said, in the Sandstone Marketplace development. Highlighted in blue is the building extents. You'll see that there is an entrance on the bottom side, the south side of the building, and also an entrance on the west side, on the left side of the building. We have access points off of Bryan Avenue that are shared with our east and west adjacent lots, so 2 access points to service the property. On the drive-through, there are 3 drive-through windows. So you have your pay window, which is on the top right corner of the building. The middle window is your pickup window number 1. And in the top left corner of the building is your pickup window number 2. One thing I did want to point out is on the left side of the building, you'll see that there is an extension of that drive-through lane. So this is called the roll forward lane for McDonald's, and this allows for folks who are in the drive-through lane, let's say they have a larger order, they're able to pull into this roll forward lane, and an employee is able to take out the food to the customer. This keeps the employee close to the building for safety purposes, but then it also helps the drive-through operate efficiently while not, sitting in the main drive-through lane. The last item I wanted to point out is the items that are highlighted in green on your screen. So this is all the landscaping that's proposed for this site. And the main point with this is that on the north side, so north of the building, is the 50-foot gateway buffer. That's a requirement by the city. And you will see that we are adhering to that buffer setback. So the next few slides, I'm going to go over the site plan layout evolution with the city. So our first submittal to the city was on July 12th, 2023. The image on the screen, a few items I wanted to point out, and we'll see how this changes through the site plan layout. You'll see that the access points that were off of Bryan Avenue, those were first internal on the McDonald's property. They weren't shared with the east and west uses, adjacent properties. There is a 5-foot landscape buffer on the south side boxed in red. And then in the top right, what's boxed there is what we call a full bypass lane. So this is a lane that is adjacent to the drive-through for cars that are going around the drive-through. Our second submittal was completed on December 13th, 2023, and highlighting some of these key areas again, you will see that the access points off of Bryan Avenue have now moved to be shared with the east and west adjacent properties. The landscape buffer was modified to be 10 feet. And then in the top right, where we had that full bypass lane, that was actually removed to be a partial bypass lane, and landscaping was proposed there in its place. Our third submittal was completed on March 28th, 2024, and you might notice that the interior of the parking lot area looks different from the previous two slides. So the landscape buffer on the south side is actually, it's now 20 feet because Bryan Avenue is a public road, and that caused the internal portion of the parking lot to be modified to have angled parks and one-way drive aisles for circulation in order to meet that setback requirement. We did want to talk through, we've gone through, those were 3 submittals that we completed with the city over, a 6 to 8 month timeline. We did look at a couple other options for orienting the building to be in the north-south direction, and looked at a few other concepts that way. As you can see, with the 20-foot landscape buffer on the south side and the 50-foot gateway buffer on the north side, that's taken away 70 feet in the north-south direction on this property that we can't encroach into with parking or drive-through lanes, building, et cetera. So as you see, when we rotate the building in the north-south direction, we are substantially encroaching into that 50-foot gateway buffer. So our fourth and final submittal was completed on June 3rd, 2024. We were requested to provide cross-access connection for pedestrians to the future east lot. So that is boxed in red on your screen. And then that center lane, as Kristen had said, that is for EV vehicle, electric vehicle stalls, and that's whether they are installed at time of store opening or for future-ready stalls. And this was due to the EV ordinance that was passed in March that we had to adhere to. Highlighting pedestrian connectivity, we wanted to look at pedestrian connectivity to the Sandstone Marketplace development and also the McDonald's lot. So we show on the screen adjacent uses next to the Sandstone Marketplace development. Dashed in blue on your screen are all existing sidewalks that have connection to the Sandstone Marketplace development. And the purple dash line are 2 sidewalks that are proposed with the master development, and it's for sidewalks that are along Bryan Avenue on both the north and south side of Bryan Avenue. Now zooming in, Kristen had shown this depiction as well, zooming into the McDonald's property. Highlighted in yellow, you have the existing sidewalk along Highway 119. You have on the south side the sidewalk that will be installed with the master development along Bryan Avenue. And then highlighted in green are the connections from the McDonald's building to the north to Highway 119, to the south to Bryan Avenue, and then also to that east adjacent lot. So we wanted to pull up some similar uses along the corridor, primarily looking at the corridor on Highway 119 from Main Street to I-25. And, we wanted to show this depiction to show that, a fast food use is not unique in this corridor. There are actually 9 fast food restaurants along this corridor today. And we show, a cluster 3.5 miles east and then also 3 miles west of the Sandstone Marketplace development. And for example, the Taco Bell that is on the lower screen was actually approved in 2017. So this isn't a unique use along the Highway 119 corridor. So now I will hand it back off to Carolyn to discuss the review criteria.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to go through the site plan criteria now. And I'm going to start with this very first one, talking about consistency with the comprehensive plan. This was one that the commissioners, that you all spent a fair bit of time discussing in the prior hearing. This criterion requires that the proposed SIP support the goals in the comprehensive plan, and you ultimately concluded that you felt that this was not met. And so I want to just get into a little bit more detail on that and explain to you why we and staff both concluded that this criterion is met. So starting from the beginning of sort of, what is Envision Longmont and how is that plan meant to be used? It is an advisory document that outlines Longmont's aspirations for the future. That's a direct quote from the introduction to the plan. And the Planning Commission said, hey, in this section, in Envision Longmont, where we talk about what belongs in a regional area, in a, regional commercial area, it doesn't expressly say fast food with drive-through. And so for that reason, it cannot possibly be compatible with the overall comprehensive plan. But the way that we think that the comprehensive plan should be used in this analysis is to think about the comprehensive plan setting forth the vision at a very high level, right? It's very generic, it's very zoomed out. Of course, it doesn't list every single use that ought to be allowed within the regional corridor designation. In fact, that's what the zoning is for. The zoning code implements the vision. So you look at the hierarchy, right? Here's the comprehensive plan that says, here's what our vision is, and we implement it through the zoning code. In the zoning code, in MUR, the zoning district that is meant to link to this particular comprehensive plan designation, it does expressly say fast food with drive-through is allowed as a conditional secondary use. So conditional use meaning that you can apply additional conditions to it in order to make it compatible, and secondary meaning that it meets those three other criteria that we talked about at the beginning. But the comprehensive plan is advisory, it's not regulatory. The regulatory thing here is the zoning code, the MUR zoning district. So in that regional center designation in Envision Longmont, these are some of the languages used to describe what is the vision of what the city wants to see within that area that we think this is in fact compatible with. So for example, it does say restaurant. It does not say drive-through, it doesn't say fast food. It also doesn't say sit down, high-end, fast casual. It doesn't really break out the types of restaurants. And again, we think that that's because that's how comprehensive plans are written, to be very sort of high level and talk about broad categories of uses, whereas the zoning code talks about the specific use types and actually defines what each of those uses are and how they differ from each other. Also on the far right column, the comprehensive plan talks about what are some of the key characteristics that we want to see in the regional center designation. We want to serve the commercial and retail needs of the city. Well, this use certainly would serve the commercial and retail needs of the city. And I assure you that the applicant would not be proposing this use in this location if they did not have data to support that there is significant and meaningful demand to support this use in that location. Also, targeted infill. This is an infill site. It's an open vacant site that's surrounded by development on several sides, and this is infill in that location, consistent with the vision of what was previously approved to be on that site. And the very bottom bullet there, largely auto-oriented today, future development should be designed to support existing and future transit. And there was some talk in the last meeting about the multimodal plan, and do you have a separate multimodal plan for this particular site? Actually, there's a multimodal plan for the entire Sandstone Marketplace that was part of the original approval, and we submitted an extra copy of that in the packet that I referenced earlier. And this particular site will be implementing some components of that multimodal plan, including the pedestrian connectivity that was just illustrated for you a moment ago. So then we go to the zoning that is implementing that regional center vision, and that is the mixed-use regional center, the MUR zoning. And this is the purpose statement of what that MUR zoning is designed for. It is designed for mixed-use redevelopment, emphasis on commercial and retail needs of the city and the region, right? 119 is a major highway. It's a major connectivity to I-25. Lots of people who drive through there may or may not be Longmont residents, but may be visiting Longmont for other purposes or going to I-25. And this is certainly a regional corridor, and this is certainly a regional serving use. Regional scale employment, commercial activities, easy access to public amenities, including public transit. So obviously within that MUR zoning district, this particular use, restaurant with drive-through, That's the place, the excerpt from your zoning table where it says it's a CS, that's a conditional secondary use. So that conditional secondary use is if and, what it really means is if and to the extent the site can be designed in such a way as to comply with all the performance standards and requirements and to meet those secondary use criteria, that it's compatible in terms of scale, location, and so on, then it is an allowed use within that zone district. So let's move on to the next criteria. Complies with applicable city standards, including street and utility design and layout. Adequate utilities are available or will be provided. So in terms of the technical details of the site plan, setbacks, landscaping, and so on, I don't think there's any dispute that this application complies with all of those criteria. We are not planning to spend a whole bunch of time going through those technical criteria because that wasn't a major focus of your discussion in the last hearing. But I do want to talk about a little bit that criterion related to adequate utilities will be available. And that sort of comes up again in criteria number 4 when we talk about no adverse impact on existing or planned city transportation, because you all did have a pretty robust discussion about the potential traffic that this proposed application might generate and how that should be taken into account in your consideration of the conditional site plan application, conditional use site plan application. And ultimately, you all concluded as one of the factors supporting your denial that you ought not to approve this application because it would add additional traffic to an already congested area. Well, no question that any development on this site for any type of use, whether it's an allowed primary use, whether it's a conditional secondary use, will add traffic, for sure. Compared to a vacant site, any development obviously will add traffic. So that's a given. But that's not the standard that we're looking at. I want to just remind everyone, again, back to the history, right? There is a larger development here, and there was just a little while ago that you all approved a larger traffic study that was conducted for that larger development. And when you approved that larger development, that subdivision plan, you looked at the traffic study for all of the uses, collectively in the aggregate that would be potentially on this site, including, and that traffic study assumed 11,500 square feet of fast food drive-through use. So that prior traffic study already took that into account. And when you had that conversation, and I actually went and pulled the minutes, and those are in your packet too, just to remind us all what that conversation was, there was a lot of discussion about the level of service E potential along Highway 119 here, and what might cause that in the future. And it was very clear from the traffic study then that that intersection will be level of service E with or without all of the development in Sandstone Marketplace. We have our traffic engineer here, and he can correct me if I say any of this wrong, and we can get him up here to answer your questions if you want to talk about the technical details. My point is this. To the extent that there will be additional traffic that might exacerbate that condition, it is not due to this conditional use site plan. It is due to existing regional background traffic that you will have either way, no matter what. So the only way that you could ensure that there will be no traffic generated on this site is to simply not allow it to develop at all for any use. And given that you already just approved it for a subdivision, I don't think that is the intent. But in the meantime, this proposed use will not negatively impact the traffic infrastructure in this vicinity. In fact, as part of the approval of that prior larger Sandstone Marketplace development, part of the requirement was that that developer was going to be required to construct some improvements or to contribute funds towards some improvements that would accommodate and help to mitigate potential traffic impacts for the entire development as a whole. And that did take into account the potential for, as I said, 11,500 square feet of drive-through use. In particular, on this site, we're looking at 6,000 square feet is what was in the original traffic study. We're now proposing 4,365. So actually, there will be less traffic as a result of this conditional use site plan as proposed compared to what was approved in that prior Sandstone Marketplace analysis. So let's move on to the next one. It's compatible with surrounding properties in terms of land use, site, building layout, design, and access. This application does propose development compatible with the surrounding properties in terms of land use, site, and building layout, design, and access. And as Jessica explained, sort of the evolution of the site plan. This site plan went back and forth several times, working with staff to try to identify what are the ways that it could be improved, what are the ways that it could be made more compliant. Ultimately, the standard for that approval of the site plan isn't, is there a different way we would have wanted to design it? Is there a better site plan we could have designed? That's not really the question. The question is this site plan as being presented to you, does it meet the criteria? And we think it does, and your staff analysis has concluded that it does as well. It is in fact compatible with surrounding properties. And as Jessica explained, this site has been designed to function effectively within the constraints of, for example, there's an existing easement, the dual accesses on either side, that gateway buffer on the north side that all the properties along here are required to comply with. Here are some of the specifics out of that site plan technical criteria. Front yard building setback, building height maximum, parking spaces, drive-up windows, the stacking distance. All of these meet the technical requirements and no variances or modifications are being requested. Let's see, we are on number 4. It will not adversely affect surrounding properties, the natural environment, existing or planned city transportation, or utility services or facilities, and any adverse impacts will be mitigated to the maximum extent feasible. That was the conclusion of staff in the staff report, and we agree with that. We already talked about the traffic, so I won't repeat that as it relates to city transportation, utility services and facilities and adverse impacts. And other than the traffic, I don't think that there was any discussion of other potentially adverse impacts, but certainly we're happy to discuss that if you think that there are. Sustainability evaluation system to the extent applicable. It does not appear that this is directly applicable. None of the sustainability evaluation requirements technically apply, although I will mention that, as we showed you just a moment ago, that there is a great deal of thought given to the EV charging stations and the opportunity for future EV charging stations. And so there is some sustainability factors built into the site design independently of the sort of separate criteria. And then finally, appropriate transportation plan, including multimodal transportation access, integrated and connected where appropriate, street connections, sidewalks, trails, and similar features. And this also is somewhat a repetitive criterion, and we talked a little bit about some of the components. I just want to emphasize Highway 119 there, as I know you all know, it's a major arterial. Annual average of 35,000 cars per day, speed limit 55 miles per hour. So this is not a location where there's a great deal of opportunity to facilitate pedestrian walkability. The real focus on pedestrian walkability with this site design has been interior to the site and to connect the site to the adjacent properties like the Walmart, like the ball fields to the east, to make sure that once you are in the site, you can easily move around throughout the site without having to use a vehicle and to be able to access alternative multimodal modes of transportation. And so if you look at the multimodal plan that was originally approved for overall Sandstone Marketplace, and you look at the ways in which this site will be implementing some components of that plan as they are adjacent to this parcel, you can see that it absolutely is facilitating that. We do have, as I mentioned, our traffic engineer if you want to talk about anything more in detail about that. Just to refresh, this is the same slide that Jessica showed you earlier in terms of that pedestrian connectivity. And what we're showing here is not just the connectivity, immediately adjacent to the site, but how you could easily walk from this site with all of the other connections to all of those other places I mentioned, over to the baseball complex, over to the Walmart, across the street to the hospital, and including to the residential to the immediate south. This is an excerpt from that original Sandstone Marketplace multimodal plan that this site will be implementing a portion of. So then lastly, we have the conditional use section, and this is just sort of a quote from the code. As you can see, it's not really a set of criteria, rather it just says that you have authority to impose conditions to ensure compliance with the standards, including, as was already summarized earlier by Kristen, time limits, review, approval, et cetera. And ultimately, what happens if the permit that is granted isn't utilized, that it could be discontinued in the future. So that's the conclusion of our formal presentation. I know that we've given you a lot to read, and so I just want to say that we really appreciate your time and attention to this matter a second time, and we appreciate the opportunity to present to you again in a little bit more detail. And we look forward to answering any questions that you have, and we look for your favorable approval of this conditional use site plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you, Jessica. And I will open it up now to any questions from the commission. Public is first. We do have someone? Okay. Next, I guess, should be the invitation for the public hearing. If there's any people here that would like to come up and speak, there's none that have signed up, but you may still do so if you are here and would like to speak. Seeing none, I will close the public comment section and open it up to the commission for discussion or questions to either Kristen or to the applicant. Commissioner Height.
Thank you. I never can tell. Am I on?
No.
You should be.
Now I'm on?
You gotta make them red.
It's on you. Red me up.
So hit it and then hit mic on. He's hot.
Thank you. I appreciate you all coming back. I want to make clear that I understand what the procedural posture of this case is. We denied this application. It was appealed. I understand that the appeal from City Council was a stipulation that City Council would send it back to us. Tell me how that works. I thought they had to review it and approve it or deny it. How does it come back to us? And again, I appreciate that what's being brought to us is more information that wasn't brought to us the first time it came around, which is part of the reason why I personally voted to deny this thing the first time it came around. As I understand the denial, you wait a year and come back. You can appeal. City Council has the approval, has the authority to overrule the denial, but I've never seen a remand. And I can't say I've seen the world either.
Good evening, members of the commission. Jeremy Terrell, Assistant City Attorney. Thank you for the question, Commissioner Height. And I did not have that section pulled up, so just give me one moment. So I'm looking at section 1502.030K11 of the Longmont Municipal Code. Which notes the available options for City Council to consider a final, an appeal of a final decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The options before City Council are to either uphold, modify, or reverse the decision-making body's action. And in addition, the City Council may also remand the appeal to the Planning and Zoning Commission with directions for the Commission to get further consideration for this matter. And so that was the criteria by which this is before the Planning and Zoning Commission. City Council, in conjunction with the applicant, staff, and the City Attorney's Office, came to the conclusion that it's more appropriate for the record to be supplemented and for Planning and Zoning to be reconsidering based on the supplemental evidence along with anything else they consider from the first hearing. At this point, Planning and Zoning Commission can make its decision to either approve without conditions, approve with conditions, or to deny the application. at which point the applicant or any interested person under our code could then appeal that next decision of tonight's decision to city council again.
So again, so I'm clear, city council remanded to us to reopen the hearing, basically, to take in more evidence and then redecide.
Correct.
Gotcha. Fantastic. In that regard, the site plan, as originally presented, was 1 page. It's now 39 pages. It includes construction and landscape plans as well. But what held me up originally is the 1-page document appeared to have been premised upon the preliminary plat. There's now been a final plat approval. Is that correct? Ms. Cody?
That is correct,
Cool.
Commissioner Height.
And the final plat didn't come to us, it was approved by staff.
Correct. Final plats do
Okay.
not go before the Planning Commission.
And in the 39-page site plan that I see now, there's still reference to proposed lots and proposed boundaries. And maybe, Jennifer, I forgot your last name, McCallum?
Jessica?
Jessica. Sorry. Why does it say that? Why is it proposed lots and proposed boundaries as opposed to, we have a final plat approved here? Why aren't you using that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So during.
Microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I can answer that. So during our time of going through the city process, we are able to submit at the same time that a final plat is going through review. So we're running those concurrently. So in terms of when we first submitted, those were proposed property lines. The final plat wasn't approved. That's something that we can work with the city to simply remove proposed from that and state property line. But those property lines do match what was in the final plat, and that has been coordinated.
Okay. I note that in the documents that you sent to us that are all dated September 19th, it still says proposed. So I
Yeah.
guess it's fine, because I've confirmed that the lot boundaries appear to be the same as in the
Yep.
final plat. It threw me for a loop the first time.
Yep.
It's still throwing me for a loop, but I think I worked myself around it. In that regard too, just to be picky and a bit of a putz, sheet 7, which is your bike rack, or it contains your bike rack
Yeah.
reference, it has the City and County of Denver Planning Department approval. I don't know why that's there and something submitted to us. I'm assuming you just cut and pasted.
So for that bike rack, are you talking about the bike rack detail?
The bike rack detail, exactly.
Yeah, so what we do is we will utilize, if there isn't a bike rack detail that's available from the city, which Kristen can speak to if there is, we will use other bike rack details that we've seen in jurisdictions to basically provide input for the contractor on what they can source for that bike rack.
God, it's just kind of weird to see something for Denver in the Longmont zoning application. So my comment was there. 1505080E, which is parking, number of units, 10 per 1,000 for this 4,300 square foot unit would be 44 parking spaces. You only have 29. How come?
That's a maximum parking requirement,
Understand, why are you at 29?
because that's what we could propose on the site.
That's all
With
that
her.
fits?
Well, so we did have our original layout that had a little bit more parking, but yes, with those setback requirements, with the landscaping and having to go with angled parking, that's how we could maximize the parking, which was 29 parking stalls.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the engineering that went into figuring that out. Is 29 spaces enough?
Yes, we believe so.
Okay. And again, this is a drive-through facility, so most of your customers will be drive-through? Is that the anticipation?
Yes, the anticipation that most of the customers will be through the drive-through lanes.
Okay. So, back to the traffic impact study. This is a 4,000 square foot facility versus a 6,000 square foot facility as originally proposed. Was the original facility a drive-through facility?
I can have Curtis speak to that, our traffic engineer. He might be better suited for that.
The question is, to cut to the chase, whether or not there's more or less traffic associated with this 4,000 square foot drive-through facility as opposed to a 6,000 square foot facility as originally anticipated.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. I'm Curtis Rowe with Kimley Horn Associates. To answer that question, yes, the original traffic study included on this lot 4 a 6,000 square foot fast food restaurant with drive-through.
Okay.
And so it's a direct comparison, yes.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you. Next question, the 180 foot stacking requirement in driving, I'm sorry, in the parking regulation, 1505080. It's 180 foot stacking from the first service window. I noticed in your plans you have 3 service windows. Do you have 180 feet from which window?
Yeah, so the 108, it's 202 feet that we have proposed, and that's from the third window,
The last window?
the last window,
Not
correct?
the first window?
Correct.
What is it from the first window?
It is, I believe, 100 feet.
100 feet. Staff, does that make a difference?
We would look at it as that they comply with the required 180 feet and they comply with our code. So it is appropriate what they're proposing in relation to code requirements.
Why is it 180 feet from from a window? Does anyone know? Traffic?
I can answer in terms of general case, like,
Sure.
you know, from this, the McDonald's drive-through operation has windows as part of the drive-through for the entire sequence. And so you pay cash, you get your food. So it's the entire sequence. Other fast food restaurants have that occur at the same location, same window. And so in this case, there are those transactions that are occurring along the entire route. And so it actually is a more efficient, streamlined drive-through operation proposed here.
I can appreciate that. Our code says service window, though.
Good evening, Commissioners. Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the city. We typically have our standards based on a 20-foot vehicle standard, and we kind of got tired of doing the 4+8 kind of situation of stacking, so we put it as, you just tell us, as you're the professional who owns the drive-through and the restaurant, you know how much space you need for drive-through. So instead of trying to regulate that, we left it open to the applicants and just put a minimum in there for a certain number of vehicles. What we say 9 vehicles for 180.
Got it. But do we care about what is the service window? There's 3 of
Nope,
them here.
that's exactly why we took that out, Commissioner Wright, was to not try to regulate what was between each window, how many spaces were between each window. We left it, again, open to every drive-through restaurant we were talking with had different levels of need for how they worked through the drive-through operation. There were some that were coffee shops, and so they did everything at one window. There were certain things like McDonald's that had 2, 3 windows because of the different style of way that they were trying to serve the public. So we decided it was best for us just to kind of stand back as a city and not try to regulate that.
Got it, but I think I'm reading the code differently, which says, if I can find it, drive-through aisles, windows for food shall have at least 180 feet measured from the service window to the point of entry for the stacking. I don't know what.
Right, that should be the last window or the only window, the service window. So that's where the food comes out. And so we just said,
So you think it's
build the
window
minimum, but we don't care what you put in between there.
Okay. Riddle me this while you're still here, Phil. The 2023 preliminary plat was approved by us, and I recall to some extent we were concerned about the level of service at County Line and 119. And I don't recall exactly what that was, but I think there were some mitigation expectations or requirements imposed on the preliminary plat in 2023. Can you confirm for me that when we review the site plan associated with the preliminary plat, are we bound to the traffic study from whenever the preliminary plat was approved?
I'll ask Caroline to come down and help answer that question for me. So I believe the answer is yes, because we are going back to that preliminary plat, but I'll
Okay.
defer. Thanks.
Commissioner Height, you'll have to repeat the question.
So in 2023, the approval of the preliminary plat, as I recall, the commission was concerned about the level of service associated with the intersection of County Line Road and 119. It was going to go to status D, E, or F, I think. And we were concerned about that. And there were discussions, if not promises, I don't recall, regarding mitigation efforts. So my first question is this commission now, in reviewing a site plan associated with that preliminary plat, bound by the traffic study submitted for the preliminary plat? Because we approved it with that traffic study, does that traffic study still control our review today?
That is an excellent question, Commissioner Height. When the preliminary plat of the Sandstone Marketplace subdivision was approved by the Planning Commission, it included the level of service. Let's see. It included the level of service modification in reference to County Line Road and 119. There were conditions placed upon that approval, including signage that's a requirement of the subdivision to install, and a northbound right turn lane and the designated length. There was discussion at that meeting in reference to the regional nature of the traffic in that general vicinity. So I would say that the approval of the level of service modification would hold true, for this development going forward as a whole.
Okay. So the second question associated with that issue is, regardless of whether or not we're bound, we're allowed to conditionally approve this project. And with respect to mitigation efforts that one might impose as a conditional use, how do we get to impose those? Is it an exaction that we're entitled to put upon this particular project? Or does it have to be spread over other developments or other projects in this subdivision, or is it something that the city has to eat on its own? And I don't, whoever can answer that. I'm happy.
Commissioner Height, it would be very unusual for one pad site of a larger development to be responsible for mitigating traffic impacts as a whole, especially at an intersection like Highway 119 and County Lane Road.
But how do we get those impacts mitigated? Do we do that? Can we do that? It's a conditional review.
Good evening, Commissioners. Josh Sherman, Engineering Administrator of Public Works. So if I'm following the conversation, Commissioner Height, each property and each property that does development under their building permits required to pay for a transportation community investment fee and impact fee related to that. Those fees specifically are for system-wide improvements to specifically things like arterial roadways, traffic signals, etc. So each development does contribute in a way through that impact fee.
Can we adjust that fee? I mean, I don't.
That fee is
again,
set by code.
Okay,
so
that's set by code. And so it's already a tax imposed upon projects.
it's a fee imposed upon a building permit based on the,
got it.
yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Commissioner Height, if I could just add one additional piece to your question concerning conditions. Looking at our code and conditions approval concerning what a decision-making body may impose, Section N2 of 1502-030 indicates that conditions of approval shall be reasonably related to the anticipated impacts of proposed use or development and should be based on adopted standards. I assume those adopted standards are from our code or other development standards. And just the question about specifically on money, it does have to be calculated based on a formula applicable to a broad class of applicants and should be roughly proportional both in nature and extent to the anticipated impacts of proposed development as shown through individualized determinations of impact. All of that to say that I would my recommendation for the commission is that any consideration of fees have to be based off the predetermined calculation as determined by staff. In my opinion.
We could do it if we had the math.
If you have the math, then yes.
Understand. My final question, and I think it might be for you, Ms. Cody, is this drive-through facing a roadway. We saw a similar issue at 119 and 287. I think it was a Tebow project. I think we denied it because it was going to be a blank wall. Now, as I looked into it further, the code says it has to be 50% windows or doors. Looking at the north facade of this structure, there's some windows, some doors. Does it meet the 50% criterion?
That is an excellent question, Commissioner Height. Let me reference my architectural plan to see what their transparency calculations have been determined.
Good question.
So they never did anything at that place that we denied because of the 50%.
I think he appealed it. I don't know what happened to
That
that.
was on the west side of 287 and on the south side of the road, right? I don't think anything happened there.
I think it's still vacant. There's still a house there.
There's still a house there, right?
The applicant has that calculation at their fingertips, and they will discuss that with you.
Well, it wasn't at our fingertips, she had to look, but.
More at your fingertips than I did.
Yeah, a little bit, the answer depends in part on how you calculate it. If it's, and Jessica can explain in more detail, if it's linear, the answer is yes.
Yeah, that is correct.
Then, yeah, and it's on sheet A21 of the
Victory.
exterior elevations. Do you want to elaborate? Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
I just want to make sure that staff's aware of it and has calculated it and approves it. I have no basis of determining it myself.
Yes, that is included in the review, and on each of the architectural elevations, they're required to include their percentage of transparency. So that would be where in the review process that is considered.
Okay, it's been, all I saw was an issue. And I couldn't tell whether that had been met. With that, appreciate you all entertaining my questions. I appreciate the applicant coming back and presenting this additional information. It clarifies some of the concerns I had, and with that, I turn it over to others.
Do we have any other comments or discussion from the commission? I would like to make a couple of comments, I guess. So when we looked at this the first time, one of my biggest issues for denying it was the traffic study. And it appears from the original traffic study that whatever we do with the Sandstone Marketplace, that the LOS for 119 and County Line is going to drop from a D to an E, which is, per the city of Longmont, not an acceptable level. But it's still at an E with this project. So even though this project does generate traffic, and a fast food drive-through generates more trips per day than any of the other uses by a long shot, it's still within the level E, level of service. So does that mean it's not any worse than the project as a whole? Probably not. So I probably overreacted a little bit about that, because the traffic study was based on everything that's going in there. And this small parcel, even though it generates more trips than any other parcel, is still just a small percentage of the overall additional trips. How's that for talking in a circle? One of the issues that one of the other commissioners brought up the last time, who isn't here tonight, was the fact that the site was just way too crowded. There was just way too much stuff on it. And in addressing that, it appears that you have deleted some of the parking that you had before. So I think that's a good thing. It also makes the project a little less auto-centric, and I think that's a good thing as well. I'm concerned that we still have proposed property lines and don't have the finals on what we're looking to approve as a final approval here. If we approve this tonight, it does not go back to the city council for another approval. So this is kind of it. So I'm disappointed that that wasn't fixed in time. Let's see. At our last meeting, another thing that was brought up, and I'm still unclear, and I would like staff to just make me feel better, please. A conditional secondary use of a drive-through restaurant is not specifically noted in all of the Longmont documents. Certainly, it's listed as a secondary, a fast food restaurant. A fast food restaurant is listed as a secondary use. A drive-through fast food restaurant is not. So I would just like staff to respond to that, because I still feel like we are not following the letter. And those were my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Boone. I can certainly talk about the comprehensive land use plan. The comprehensive land use plan outlines Longmont's aspirations for the future. It plays a role in policy guidance for elected and appointed officials in regards to long-range needs. It helps inform residents, property owners, business owners, et cetera, for the future and general priorities for implementation. And it promotes that continued coordination and collaboration with neighboring jurisdictions and many public and private nonprofit agencies. That being said, it would be our high-level guidance document, and then to hone in on specific uses and regulations, you look towards your Longmont Development Code, your Section 600. So it gives us our aspirations, but it's not as all-encompassing of document as code, whereas it's not going to address every use that code does. And I don't know if Grant or Jeremy would like to add to that.
Is the drive-through, specifically the drive-through fast food restaurant, listed in the code?
Yes, it is. It is in our use table as a conditional secondary use.
Okay, it didn't used to be.
Sure.
So
Yep.
it's a more recent addition.
Indeed, that yes. And restaurants in general are permitted in that zone district.
Oh, of course,
And
restaurants in
it's
general.
the addition of the drive-through which adds that conditional approval requirement to it.
It just kind of surprised me that changed since the city of Longmont, in a number of cases, has really discouraged drive-throughs and even banned them, like on Main Street. I know we're not talking about Main Street, but so it seems like promoting drive-throughs is still going a little bit backwards, but that's just my feeling. Okay, so Commissioner Height.
I'm back. 1502055, which is the review criteria applicable to all use review procedures, states as number 1 is whether or not the project is in conformity with the comprehensive plan. So even though Envision Longmont might be a high-level guidance document, statutorily in our land use code, we've adopted a standard as to whether or not the particular project is in conformity with this guiding principle. I think it's a misnomer to say it's just guiding. We adopt that guidance as part of our review criterion. That said, I now recall as well 1 or 2 of our now missing commissioners' comments were that the regional center at a global level is supposed to be big box retail, maybe big box food, maybe big box entertainment. It's supposed to be large. And it's supposed to attract people to Longmont. And I think the questions then were, does a McDonald's fast food, for which there is 1-2 miles west and 1-2 miles east-ish, is that really attracting people to Longmont? In the larger sense, this retail center is supposed to do that. And the question was, as I recall, the issue for these other commissioners was whether or not this project did that. So, speaking for the absent, that is an issue. Thanks.
I was looking at the plan. How much outdoor seating is being planned for this development?
So there is no outdoor seating proposed with the development.
Okay. And then the parking spaces, I see you had to go smaller at the angled. Are there parking spaces designated for mobile order pickup?
Yes, there are parking
Where-
spaces dedicated.
Where are those? I'm not seeing them. There's a lot of.
So, should be on sheet 8. Yeah. So for the mobile order pickup, that's denoted with keynote P. And those are the parking stalls adjacent to the building and adjacent to the handicap parking stalls on sheet 8.
PPP. Is it on the west side of the building? Am I looking right at it? My monitor's
So on
kinda
the south side of the building, the parking stall is directly adjacent to the building.
Okay. And is there a clean way for the employees to get the food out to those folks? Like, is that southerly entrance where they'd go?
Correct, yep. So there's a southern entrance on that side that employees could go out.
Okay. And how much I'm sure you guys, I wasn't at the first meeting of this. How many guests is this designed to accommodate?
I'd have to look back, but I believe it's 65 maybe. Interior.
Seated interior to the restaurant, you mean?
Yeah, how many people could come sit down and eat?
It's 66.
66. Okay.
And to go back to the outdoor seating as well, there is a park that is proposed across the street for some open space area.
Okay. And I get the point you were making about the. Where'd you go? I'm sorry. That you were making about the sidewalk and the multimodal and not so much to get, across 119 from the hospital maybe, but from the ball field or the apartments or whatever. However, I feel like this is really being set up for a drive-through as opposed to somebody's going to walk over to get a quarter pounder or whatever. So I get that, but I think the people in and around that live like to the west of there, if they're going to go get something to eat, they're probably just going to get in their car and drive either to here or to Chick-fil-A or to the other McDonald's on Main Street or the other McDonald's out by the highway. So I don't know if that's something that would get utilized that much, in my opinion. Like mentioned from the ball fields or from Walmart, yeah, maybe, but people are going to the ball fields are typically going there to watch their kids, and I don't know. I'm thinking they might pick something on their way there, on their way back. But this does really look like it's kind of set up for, probably 90% drive-through traffic and not a whole lot of people sitting down because there's not a ton of room and not a whole lot of people walking up to grab food to go. That's my opinion.
And
Thank-
from, excuse me,
Go ahead.
just to respond to that, and from a drive-through perspective, speaking with McDonald's, it's 71.4% through the drive-through is anticipated.
Mostly
Very exact
drive-through.
number.
Okay.
In Longmont. Very exact.
Thank you, Commissioner Lang. And do I see any other comments or discussion? I do not. So I guess that means it's time to see if somebody would like to present a motion. Okay. I guess I can throw out a motion to approve this project, which would be 24, get my numbers right here. 24-8A, which would be an approval of the project. Do I hear a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay. Can we have a vote, please?
Commissioner Height?
Aye.
Commissioner Teta?
Aye.
Commissioner Kohler?
Aye.
Vice Chair Boone?
Nay.
Commissioner Lang?
Nay.
Vice Chair, that passes 3-2.
Okay, thank you. So this item now can go to an appeal process. It enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the city clerk's office and the planning office within the 7-day appeal period, which begins Thursday, October 17th at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, August 23rd at 5. Oh, yeah, that's miswritten. October 23rd at 5 p.m. So with that, I would like to thank the applicant and thank Kristen and the rest of the staff for their presentation tonight, and we will move on. Now it is time for final call for public comment. We can open a final call for public comment for anyone wishing to speak about items that were not on tonight's agenda or future agendas. Seeing none, and no one else coming forward, we will close the final call for public comment and see if there are any other items from the commission. Seeing none, see if there are any, well, we don't have a council representative tonight, so we will move on. Are there any other items from Grant and the Planning and Development Services Department?
Sure, Chair, members of the commission, just a quick heads up. It looks like we will likely have a meeting or an item for public hearing in November. Haven't definitively confirmed, but we'll ask that if you're available, coordinate with Jane so we can make sure that we do have a quorum again. That's it.
Okay. So I think, seeing nothing else, we are in adjournment. Adjournment. There we go. Thank you all for your patience. This was my first time in this.
You did great, Terry. That was awesome.